I am so excited to announce that the doors to Panic to Peace are opening on September 5th. This is my signature program where over the course of 10 weeks, I walk you through how to actually create a healthy relationship with anxiety, simply and practically. And this round is a little different from past ones because I'm offering two different options. You can either take the program live with me and also with others who are on a similar journey as you, or you can take it on your own in a self-paced version. So if this is the year you're determined to create a healthy relationship with anxiety and overcome the symptoms, the anxious thoughts, the panic attacks and fears, it's not too late. Head to the link in the show notes, get on my waiting list, and be the first to get access to the program and to get a really special discount. I hope to see you on the inside. Welcome to a Healthy Push podcast. I'm Shannon Jackson, former anxiety sufferer turned adventure mom and anxiety recovery coach. I struggled with anxiety, panic disorder, and agoraphobia for 15 years. And now I help people to push past the stuff that I used to struggle with. Each week, I'll be sharing real and honest conversations along with actionable and practical steps that you can take to help you push past your anxious thoughts, the symptoms, panic, and fears. Welcome. You're right where you're meant to be. All right, today we're doing another Q&A episode with Annie. Hi, Annie.
Hello, thank you for having me back.
Yeah, these episodes, people are really enjoying them, and I'm super excited because I love being able to chat and have conversation, and I feel like you add so much value, like having recently gone through, or still going through your recovery, and it's just so good. It's so good to have like okay, Shannon, you lived it, but it was like years and years ago. And so now you bringing that recent perspective is so helpful. And like you say things and I'm like, yes, that's so good. So I love these and I'm so happy that everyone listening is also loving them. So we're doing good.
Yes, I'm so glad. I know it's so much fun and it is funny like having just gone through it and being able to provide that perspective. It's good. It's not
Yeah, it's
fun
so
going
good.
through.
So this episode is interesting because we were like, what's a good topic? And we have like a list of topics, but I feel like I get so many questions about my own personal recovery journey. And I'm like, okay, I think we need to do an episode just specifically about my recovery journey. And so I asked you all listening, what questions do you have? So we have 6 questions that we're going to go through, and I'm super excited to hear them and to answer them and to dig into all the goodness. So,
Yeah.
Annie, take it away.
All right. I'm so excited for this because I know your story. It's so inspiring. I know if I feel that way, so many people are also going to feel that way. Like just seeing what you went through and like how you are now. Oh my gosh. I know everyone's going to love it because you're seriously amazing. So sorry, I'm
Oh,
rambling.
you're
Okay.
fine.
So number one is what was the worst point in your recovery journey? Like if you had to pick one,
Oh my gosh. What a
right?
question to start with. Okay, if you're new here, I sort of want to give you a little bit of backstory real quick. So I struggled for 15 years and with anxiety, panic disorder, and agoraphobia. There were so many worst points. I just got all these like memories flooding my brain. So I think I kind of want to answer this in a couple of ways. So I have very vivid memories of like some really, really hard, awful points in my journey. But yeah, I'm gonna save my secondary sort of thought to this for a minute. So of course, one of the hardest points in my recovery journey was actually realizing it is as bad as it is. And it's starting to really take hold of my life. And that was one of the worst points easily because I finally could see it very clearly of like, this can't continue. Like, there's no way that this can continue. And I was at the time working full time. I want to say I was in school or I recently graduated. Like I've shared this before. I'm very honest about this, but I literally got my associate's degree and it took me 6 years. like an
Same,
associate's
same.
an associate's degree is what, 2 years? And it took me a good 6. I'm very smart, right? But I definitely failed classes. I could barely show up to some classes, because I was struggling so badly. And so, anyway, I remember the point in which I thought, "Shannon, you've tried everything, and I don't think you're gonna be able to continue functioning." Like, I was really, really scared that I was gonna get to the point where I just wasn't gonna leave my house anymore, and that thought was so terrifying to me.
Yeah.
And, like, there was nothing that you could say. Panic attacks were scary, like, all of it was so scary, but the thought of not leaving my house, and, of course, there were so many days where I didn't wanna leave, and that sounded glorious, and, like, I could just easily flip the switch and just say, "No more." Um, but growing up, like, this is I'm gonna ramble a little bit, but I think it's important. Like, I grew up, in a being pretty poor, and my parents divorced when I was younger, and my mom, like, really worked her butt off to take care of my brother and my father wasn't, emotionally there, but financially definitely not supportive or helpful, and so I had all of this in my brain of, like, "Shannon, you have to work, like, you have to support yourself, like, you cannot not work, you cannot not, finish school or any of these things." It was that big picture, like, "Oh
Yeah.
my god, what is this gonna do? What could this potentially do to my life and my future?" And, yeah, I remember making an appointment with my therapist, and she said very kindly, but sort of bluntly, "I think we have to think about medication again." And I still get so emotional,
Yeah.
because that's so hard. It's so hard to think nothing else is working.
Totally.
Um, and so I went to see the psychiatrist, and I've shared this story, but my god, she was just, like, the most amazing and beautiful human that impacted my journey so much. And I remember walking in and being so scared and just thinking, "I can't try medication again," and all the thoughts, right? Have it make things worse than they are already, have it not work again, like, and then what? Um, and so I had all the thoughts, and so, yeah, trying medication after I had already been struggling, this was, like, gosh, 10 years. I had to have been struggling for 10 years at this point, and if not more.
Yeah.
And it was so tough, like, that was one of my worst points. Even
Yeah. No.
before that, I think it's so important, like, you and I have talked about this, Annie, but, like, like, I don't like to share, like, all of it because I know it can be scary for people, and I feel like I don't wanna share some of the worst points because I don't want to scare people, and I don't want people to think, "Oh my gosh, like, is that gonna happen?" But I know some people are struggling, like, just as badly, and so, there was one point, of course, a memory that I will never forget was I was working in a hospital. I always worked in the healthcare environment, and I was working in the hospital, and I had the worst panic attack I've ever had. And it wasn't just like I like to kind of paint the full picture. It wasn't just a panic attack. Like at the time, I was in a really toxic relationship. I had so much stress. I was working. I was in school. I think I had two jobs at the time.
Yeah.
Um,
You're
I
just
I
at
was
the breaking point.
Yeah, like,
Yeah.
my body truly, like, my body and my brain, like, just reached this breaking point, and I remember being at work and, like, I hope I can tell this story without being a complete disaster,
Yeah.
um, but I remember, like, just thinking, "Oh god, like, this is gonna be a really bad panic attack," and if you've had panic attacks, you know, you can kind of like feel it and
Yeah,
sense it.
yeah,
And so my go-to is always like, get me away from people. I don't want anyone to see this or know what's happening. And so I went to a bathroom and I called my mom, and like it was just so severe that I remember like kind of being like in and out of consciousness. And this was after, like, literally I had, like, vomited, and I mean, everything left my
yeah,
body, and I just I was on the phone with my mom, and my mom was like, "Shannon, you need to get up and unlock the door, like, you need to make sure that, like, somebody can come in and help you."
yeah,
And my mom was, of course, like, "I'm driving there, like, I'm gonna be there," and I couldn't really even articulate where I was. And I remember, like, it obviously had been a while, and one of my coworkers and was sort of a friend came. One of the most embarrassing moments of my life, but I wasn't embarrassed because I was barely coherent. But he opened the door and was like, "Oh my god." So yeah, he went and he got help, thankfully, and I worked in a hospital. But it wasn't like, thank goodness I was in the hospital. It was a panic attack. So there really wasn't much that, you know, they could do. But that that for me was probably one of the worst moments. But like
yeah,
that was so early in my recovery journey. Like there were so many more like hard moments. And so this kind of leads me to the second part. Like those moments were so incredibly hard. But I think the worst part, like the worst point in my recovery journey was really like being honest with myself and looking at the repetitiveness of going through the same thing every day and like being scared and restricting and limiting and avoiding and isolating. And that was the worst point, was realizing I've done this for so long, and like there's no way I can keep doing this. Like there's no way. And I
and that's
yeah.
one of the scariest points too. It's just, those, like, if you've had panic attacks, like those situations, they're truly traumatizing, and it's just hearing your story just like gets me so, oh, just choked up, like knowing what you went through. And as hard as it is to hear, and it can be scary or maybe even triggering for some to hear, it's so valuable at the same time, because you see where you were and you see now, you go on these adventures, you travel, you have a beautiful family, and you do so many cool things. And so I just hope that people listening can take that away from this. Like, as scary as those
Yeah.
moments are, you always can recover from this. And that's what's so beautiful about your story.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you said that. It's tough because that I know you get to those, it's not even like a point, but you have like all these points along your journey where you feel like I can't do this anymore, and how am I going to, and like am I ever going to get better? And that was the hardest stuff to work through, because you truly feel like when you're in it, this is it, and I'm never going to come out the other side of this. And as much as even you can have the most loving, supportive people, and you know, my mom was always so loving and supportive, she couldn't do it for me. And I just, you know, it's a really tough journey. But yeah, I know we'll talk a little bit more later about like where I'm at now, and it's so beautiful, because of course I never thought that my life would look how it does today. But it's been a wild a wild ride to say the
Yeah.
least.
It can just be so hard in that unknown, but
Yeah.
it's so inspiring to see where you are. So I
Ugh.
guess that kind of leads us into our next question, which is, something I personally relate to a lot. And that is, did you ever feel like you were just going crazy?
Oh my gosh. Like all the time. I you battle so much. Like, I know the physical symptoms can be so overwhelming and scary and alarming, but for me, a lot of it was the mental stuff that was the hardest. It was
Yeah.
really terrifying sometimes, the places my brain would go and just the stories I would create and just, like, these narratives. I am going crazy, and, like, literally, this isn't just anxiety, and, what are you gonna do? Like, and I remember feeling like and telling my mom, "I don't know, mom, like, if medication doesn't work, if nothing is, quote, working, there's something wrong with me. Like, there's something wrong with my brain, there's something, like, or there's something actually wrong and just nobody's picking up on it." And, those it was so hard because that story I just told, a minute ago about being in the hospital and having a panic attack, or being in a hospital at work, I should say, and having that really severe panic attack, I didn't find out until weeks later, but of course, my coworkers, my boss, like, everyone was just so caught off guard because I hid it so well. Like, nobody
Yeah.
knew that I struggled with what I struggled with, and they were just like, "What is happening?" And, of course, people were like, "Is Shannon on drugs? Is she taking drugs? Like, is there something really wrong with her?" And that was so hard for me to hear because it was
Totally.
like, nope. Like, there, like, truly, it was stress and
Yeah.
anxiety, and, I think we often convince ourselves, like, this is more, this can't be just anxiety, and I am going crazy, and it's like, it's hard because you have to tell yourself, get honest with yourself, and really, like, recognize, "No, this is anxiety." And
Yeah.
stress and anxiety can do some really tremendous things to your body, and, so I just wanna assure anyone out there who's like, "Am I going crazy?" No. You might feel like you are, and I get that 1,000% because it feels like you are going crazy, but you're not going crazy. Like, you are struggling with an anxiety disorder, and it is something that you can absolutely overcome. But yeah, I I get it. I get that, and I'm sure you get it too, right, Annie? Like you said, like, you do
Yeah.
feel like you're going crazy.
Gosh, yeah, like I had just so many of those days, and it can be so hard to rationalize with yourself, and just you add, like you said, like that layer of shame on top of things. I think so many of us just walk around with this intense shame, and it's just sad because we don't have to, and it doesn't always have to be like that. So it does get better because, yeah, I've totally
Yeah.
been there as well. So,
Yeah,
uh,
and what you just said, right, of rationalizing, like, we try to rationalize, and we try to, like, talk logic and stuff into this, and it's just not, you can't rationalize it. It's like,
yeah, you
just
can't think your
wild.
way out, and yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I guess we'll move on to our next question, which is how do I keep myself motivated during the worst days? Which is such a
Ugh.
good question
What a
that I'm
good
still wondering.
segue, like, these right, that I'm still wondering. So, I think there's a couple parts of this. So, I think kind of the first part is the way you treat yourself on those worst days has to be different. And, something that I heard recently, and I think I talked about this a little bit in an episode, was I heard this thing that somebody said that was like, when you're suffering, it means stop. And I was just like, whoa, that was so powerful because I like everything in you, right? Is like, you're suffering, you're struggling, like, you need to do something about it. You need to figure this out. You need to, like,
Yeah,
go,
fix
like,
it.
we can't be here. Like, if you're here, it means you're not getting better. But in that space that allows you to get better is just being with it. And that sucks. Obviously, we don't like that, but that is actually a helpful and healthy action. So, I think not running yourself into the ground when you're already having the worst days, and not convincing yourself you have to do it all no matter what. And, I hear this a lot with students and clients of like, but don't I have to do exposures? Don't I have to do them consistently? And I'm like, yes, Yes, but consistently doesn't mean every single day, no matter what, regardless of how you're feeling. And like there's just so much to that. We need to do a whole episode on exposure therapy and my thoughts on that. But I think letting yourself, rest rather than pushing is incredibly helpful.
Yeah.
And another thing on the worst days is like actually validating this is hard and I'm really struggling right now and
Mm.
making space, right? And also communicating. Like if I could go back, that's one thing. My God, I would have communicated a lot more like where I was at, how I was feeling, like and how people could help me because I just the journey in and of itself can be so isolating, but we often add so much additional on top of it and you really like that's going to make things so much harder. So just sharing and communicating like what you're actually going through and asking for that help, like it's so crucial.
Yeah.
And I know you might be like me and not good at asking for help and it's definitely something that I've had to practice a lot, but it's so so helpful, right? To actually say, I'm not okay. I need help.
Totally. I know that was one of the biggest things for me. Like, as you know, I've mentioned my husband's in the military before, but when he left for deployment and I was there in the thick of it dealing with panic attacks, I was just like, how do I even tell people I'm dealing with this? And ultimately, I kind of made things worse by trying to hide it and look like I was handling everything perfectly. So,
Yeah.
I love that you said that. It was a hard lesson for me to learn as well.
Yeah, and it's one, right, like, we sort of need to learn repetitively, it's not, like, one and done, like many things in life, but, I think the other important thing I sort of with this question, I take from it of, like, you're asking about what to do when you're having really, really hard days and the worst days, and so I really stand by what I've said, but, the motivation piece I know it's hard to find motivation when things are hard and, really, really like knowing and understanding the motivation doesn't come like it just doesn't land in your lap. It's something that happens after you take action,
Mhm.
but it's important in this instance, like the action is actually making space, like not trying to do it all and push yourself constantly and like letting yourself rest and asking for help. Like
Yeah.
that stuff is going to be a lot more helpful, I think.
Totally. I love that so much. It's so important. I think so many of us struggle with that too, just not letting ourselves rest or like enjoy things because we feel like, oh, we have to recover, but that is such a big part of recovery, right?
Yeah.
Oh, so, number four, how did it feel when you knew you had turned a real corner in your recovery journey? Like, what was that like for you, if you remember a moment?
Oh my goodness. I think this is sort of like maybe people wanting that like hope of there is like this pivotal moment. I don't know. I don't honestly, to answer this question honestly, I don't think I ever really had this moment where I knew, all right, you're doing the right thing. You're on the right track. Like you've got this.
Yeah.
Maybe I saw glimpses of that, but I don't know. As a human being, right, I feel like I always had quite a bit of self-doubt and not the like a whole ton of confidence in myself, but I think the thing I wanna mention here is, it happens like these shifts, these moments, they happen so subtly and you're not really going to pay so much attention to them. It's just happening sort of behind the scenes. And the key though is you're not like looking for this big thing that's going to make this shift. Like you're not out there like I've got to find that thing. I've got to like, it's just you're living more, you're making more life decisions, more value-based decisions, and you're not letting the anxiety and fear choose, and, like, that's what continues to help you make those shifts, but,
Mhm.
yeah, I don't know, I really have thought about this, and I don't think there is this, like, moment where I was like, "Yeah, Shannon, dang, you've got this," like
Yeah. Right.
like, it just and, when people ask, "When did it happen?" And I'm like, "I don't even really know." Like, I just
Yeah.
know I stayed focused and I just kept taking the steps, and I was not letting anxiety and fear choose, and I was taking real good care of myself. Like, it was
I
there
love
were
that.
there is no other option anymore. It's like I come
Yeah.
first, my mental health comes first, my physical health comes first, like, anything else, not happening.
So good. Yeah, and that's like I feel like that's true for me as well. Like it's hard to know exactly if there was a turning point or what because it's kind of like an upward trajectory, but then every once in a while you'll dip back or kind of repeat an old unhealthy habit or something or that whole thing. So it's hard
Yeah.
to say, but it just kind of happens and the more you practice it just yeah.
Yeah, and it's like those I guess that I'm so glad that you mentioned that because I think when you are, like, really making progress is when you stop looking at those moments, those, like, hard moments or those hiccups where you do fall back into past unhealthy behaviors and all that as, like, anything that you need to do something about. They just happen and you're like, "Okay, cool. I acknowledge that. Like, we're gonna keep going," and not allowing yourself to get stuck in it, like, that's huge.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Well, number 5, what has your relationship with anxiety looked like since you've been recovered? So we're getting into the happy questions now.
Oh, I love this. So, my relationship with anxiety obviously looks vastly different. And I talk a lot about this relationship with anxiety because this is the obvious part, right? Like, anxiety is an emotion, it's going to stay with you, but your relationship with it will change. You're not going to make anxiety go away. You can't change the way your brain, has formed and functions, but you can change your relationship with the emotion. And so, since doing all that work and changing the relationship, now it looks like when I have natural anxiety, like, when I go to the gymnastics class that I signed myself up for and I'm super introverted and I don't know anyone and I'm driving to a whole different state and like just immersing myself in experience that is so uncomfortable for me, I just let it be a little bit anxiety producing and I just go and I'm like, Makes sense, Shannon, that you're feeling anxious, but doesn't mean we're not going to do this." And there are ways in which anxiety does show up too, where it's like familiar to me and how it used to, of like those moments where I'll choose to do something and my brain will be like, "Really? You're gonna do that?" Like, it's mostly when I travel and like not so much airplanes anymore, that never pops up, but it's like when we go and do things where it's so different, so unfamiliar, like going on a safari ride, like riding, in these unfamiliar areas, like driving, in the UK, like in cars that I'm not used to on the opposite side of the
Yeah.
road, like all these, my brain is just like, "What are you doing? And what if?" That those thoughts that I used to have day in and day out will randomly pop in those instances. And it's just, okay, cute. Like, but we're just going to keep doing this. So, it's not, I always say, don't shoot for anxiety to go away. It's not going to go away, but the way it will show up when you're recovered is so different. It won't carry the same weight. It won't carry the same sensations, the symptoms. Like you might feel it viscerally, like your body might have a response to it, but you're not adding to it. You're not creating anything from it. You're not like responding to it in this harsh way. It just
Yeah.
pops up and you just keep living. Like it sounds crazy, I know, but it
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah, it's like I'm even thinking back to our first podcast episode we did. I remember just being so nervous because one time I was in like a class that was online and I had the worst panic attack in the middle of a presentation and like even now I'm just like wow, like it's crazy just seeing over the past few months. I'm like I just yeah, like it's a thing that makes me nervous, but it just doesn't matter as much. So it's
Yeah,
funny.
it is. And like, something so cool. I posted a reel recently of like me driving in my car and I was so emotional. Like sometimes I just get these waves of emotion um where I'm just like, "Dang, I do this." Like I
Yeah.
drive every day and like I have no problems and anxiety isn't there. And how crazy, right? That I got in cars for over 10 years, and every time was a battle. And just to have that awareness, like, of how hard it can be and how hard it isn't now, and just, like, how seamless and easy it is, and it's just so cool, like, it makes me smile so hard that, like, it is
Yeah,
possible when you don't think it is, and even though, maybe for you, you tell yourself that story like I did of, well, it's been, 5, 10, 15 years. Like that's that type of living. It just isn't possible for me. And it's like, that is just such bullshit. Like your brain will tell you those stories and you might go along with them, but it's bullshit. And you have to allow for your life truly to look differently. Like allow, those possibilities to be there that like maybe this isn't what the rest of your life is going to look like and maybe you are actually capable of
yeah,
driving with so much peace and freedom and ease and traveling and seeing the world and having a kid and whatever it is that you want to do in life like it's yeah so my relationship with anxiety looks so different and I'm just so thankful that I
yeah.
did all that work because it helped me not just with anxiety, but yeah, with so many other emotions and just so much of life in general.
Yeah, totally. I love that so much. I think one of the best parts about anxiety recovery is like when you come out the other side, like you're just so grateful for everything. Like everything means so much. Like just getting in your car and being able to take a deep breath and enjoy yourself. And it's so hard to realize in the moment like you can feel that way again. And so it's
Yeah,
just so I love hearing that.
it's so cool.
So, number 6, do you ever worry about going backwards and struggling again, ever?
Oh, I like love this question. I don't know why I love it
Yeah.
so much, but I think I do because I can remember obviously having this fear of like, what if I do actually get better? And and what does that look like? And like, does it
Yeah.
last? And so I think, this question is really like I get it because I would ask myself this question. I can tell you very honestly, I have never worried about going backwards, even when I had like that one panic attack that I've had since I've been recovered and it sucked. There has never been a point in the past 7 years that I've been like, "Oh shit, could I go back there?" And a big part of this, and I think, I really thought about this and I'm like, why is that? And I think there are kind of two pieces. There are way more, but I don't want to like make this an hour episode. But, I think one of the big pieces is throughout the recovery journey, I worked really hard to let go of control and to let go of certainty and to just really embrace, like, I don't know, and that's okay. And I don't have to know. And so it's sort of that like giving it up to the universe, to God, whatever. I don't know what any of the future looks like, and I don't have to. And I'm cool with that. And, doing all that work, that's why I say, and what we just talked about, like, you will be so grateful because it equips you with so much knowledge and strength and just like inner wisdom. And doing that work of accepting uncertainty, one of the greatest gifts I've ever, experienced in
Yeah.
life because it's like, I don't have any fears, worries. I trust myself and I trust, my body. So I think that kind of goes to the second piece of all the work that I did, to put the trust back within myself and back within my body. And that's a huge part of what you do when you're working to recover and continuing to do that work. Like, I don't, I think I heard this when I was recovering and it sucked. I hated it when somebody said it, but they're like, "This is gonna be work that you're gonna have to do for the rest of your life." And I was like, "Excuse
Yeah.
me?"
Yeah, that scared the crap out of me.
Yeah, I was like, "Excuse me, no thank you, like, pass. If I have to do this work for the rest of my life, what is the point?" But I didn't understand then what that meant, and I understand it
Yes.
now, and that you every day have to make these investments in yourself and, like, really treating yourself well and putting you and your mental health first and not it's it sounds kind of woo-woo, I think, but we are like, we're it, right? Like, we're all we have for however long we live, and the connections and the love that we experience and all of that, and that is the most important stuff, like, you could ever have, and so, of course, you have to give to yourself every day. Of course, you have to always make sure that you're having a healthy relationship with your emotions, and, like me recently, 2 months ago, I feel like maybe a month and a half ago, I so yeah, I need to backtrack this timeline. Maybe like 3 months ago, if not 6 months. Like, I was really struggling, and I shared a little bit on the podcast, like, I'm a perfectionist, I struggle a lot with, like, having good boundaries and just, being better with some of those things, and I've done a lot of work, but, a month and a half ago, I was like, "Nope, I need to get into therapy, and I need to actually look at this stuff." And so that's been super good for me and super healthy,
Yeah.
and so I think it's this continuous, like, you don't see, this is just being like some endpoint that you reach and I'm good now and and no more work. It's like it's a lifelong journey, but the part how I used to interpret it was you're going to have to do this work for the rest of your life relating to anxiety. And it was like,
Yeah.
no. You're going to have to do the work for the rest of your life to take care of yourself and actually make it so that you can go through life and it's not so hard and you can actually experience more peace
Yeah.
and joy. Like,
I
what a
love that.
thought, right?
I know. I love that so much because, I think that for a lot of people, it's like a lot of the reason why so many of us struggle with anxiety is usually we're really good at pouring into everyone else's cups before ours. And so a lot of that journey does look like just saying, like, okay, I'm going to do this nice thing for myself and I'm going to do this thing I know is going to make me feel better in the future. Yeah. So,
Yeah. That's and
yeah.
that's like you just hit the nail on the head, right, with what I've been struggling with, and it is I've put everyone else before me. And, if you're a mom or a dad or a caregiver, becoming a caregiver is so much of a change and so hard, and I was putting Amelia before myself, Adam before myself, every single one of my clients, students, even people who didn't choose to work with me, like, everyone,
Yeah.
and I just thought, I just want to help everyone, but I was totally losing sight of one of the biggest lessons that I learned in my recovery journey, which was you have to put yourself first. So that's what I've been working on, but I'm sure I'll do a whole episode about that. But yeah, you will get to a point in which you don't worry about going backwards. And it's natural to have thoughts right now when you're in it of like, "Oh god, I am seeing that I'm making progress and I don't wanna go backwards." I would just encourage you, keep focusing on the steps that you're taking right now. Like, that will ensure you that you're not going to go backwards, but you will develop this trust and just belief and knowing within yourself that that's we've been there and we know how we got there, and we're not going back there because we're consciously choosing every day to not go back there.
I love that so much. That is so good. So
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. Oh my god, I've loved these questions. These have been so good. But, of course, I feel like there's so much to my recovery journey, so I'm sure maybe we'll do, like, a part 2, part 3, part 4 on this.
Yes, I would love
But,
it.
yeah, these have been such good questions. So, of course, I would love to hear, like, truly, if you have any thoughts or ideas of, like, a topic that you would like Annie and I to talk about, like, shoot me an email, shannon@ahealthypush.com, or DM me. Like, I would love to hear all your thoughts and suggestions. And just, of course, as always, every day, just stay focused on right now, the present moment, and keep taking healthy action. Right, Annie?
Yes, of
All
course.
right. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of A Healthy Push. If you want more, head on over to ahealthypush.com for the show notes and lots more tips, tools, and inspiration that will support your recovery. And if you're hoping for me to cover a certain topic, be sure to join my Instagram community at A Healthy Push and let me know in the comments what you want to hear next.